the first time I heard the word treason. Attached to my name, it wasn't in a speech or a newspaper or a solemn room with cameras. It was in a narrow hallway that smelled like cheap disinfectant and hot metal. The fluorescent lights buzzed like insects trapped in glass. The floor had those tiles that are always clean, but never feel clean. And the officer walking behind me didn't need to raise his voice for me to understand that, from that moment on, my life was going to split into a before and an after. They handcuffed me with an almost ceremonial precision. The chain between my wrists was short, like someone had calculated the exact space so I couldn't fully straighten my back. It wasn't just physical control. It was a way of saying, keep your head down, learn your place, accept the official version. Do you know why you're here? The desk sergeant asked me without looking at me. I didn't answer, because the real answer was absurd, and because the absurd answer had a face. My father's face. The most respected man in my state. The one who talked about loyalty like it was a religion. The one who had built his career on the promise that in his house, in his administration, in his name, the word family meant protection. On the wall behind the desk hung his portrait, dark suit, restrained smile, the gaze of someone who never doubts in public. That same man had signed the document that said I was a threat. And I knew it because the paper, in the folder they left on the table, still smelled like fresh ink. In the top right corner, an official watermark. In the center, my full name. Below, 2 lines that made me feel a different kind of cold than the hallways. Pretrial detention on suspicion of treason. Treason. As if I had sold secrets. As if I had opened the door to an enemy. As if the last name I'd carried since childhood had suddenly become evidence. The officer looked up for the first time. You've been assigned a public defender. Until then, wait. They pushed me into a windowless room. A chair bolted to the floor. A table that looked like it was made to take someone apart with questions, not to hear answers. I was left alone with the buzz of the light and the distant sound of doors opening and closing. And then the impossible happened. The lock turned, but it didn't sound like before. There were no shouts, no heavy footsteps, none of the language of men who enjoy their authority. Only a presence that walked in as if that place had belonged to him forever. A man in a grey suit, unhurried, with a slim folder in his hand. No insignia, no visible weapon, no badge hanging from his neck like someone trying to be recognized. And yet the guard escorting him stopped in the doorway, rigid, as if, for the first time that night, he didn't know who was in charge. The man set the folder on the table and looked at me like he already knew my whole story. His eyes held no pity, no surprise. They held calculation. Behind him, the guard swallowed. The newcomer spoke in a low voice, clear without theatre. I am your father's private counsel. I felt a blow to my chest, but not relief. Rage. Disbelief. That rage that comes when you realize pain can also be a method. Then tell him to come, I said, yanking at the cuffs, making the chain clack against the table. Tell him to look me in the eye. The man didn't blink. He opened the folder, took out a sheet and laid it in front of me. It was a slip of paper, thin, almost insignificant. No letterhead, no seal, just a phrase written by hand. Orders received. I stared at those 2 words like they were a key. A key that opened something, or locked it forever. What does this mean? I whispered. The counsel dipped his head slightly, like granting a small respect. It means your father didn't bring you here to destroy you. The air felt too small. Then why? Because someone tried to destroy him, he said, and you're the most vulnerable point in his armor. The word vulnerable burned because I'd grown up believing vulnerability didn't exist in our house. There was only discipline, duty. The idea that love was proven through sacrifice, not hugs. The counsel sat on the other side of the table, as if the cold metal didn't touch him, as if the room were an extension of his office. Before we continue, he added, if this feels insane, I understand. But what's happening isn't legal or moral, it's strategic. Strategic, I repeated. They've accused me of treason. They've accused you on a document, he corrected, with a dangerous calm. That isn't the same as being convicted. And the difference is where my work comes in. I let out a dry laugh. Your work? Rescuing politicians' kids when things get messy? For the first time, a shadow crossed his expression. Not offense, recognition. My work, he said, is keeping a war from starting because of a mistake or a lie. And then I understood something that made me feel lonelier than any cell. I wasn't there for what I'd done. I was there for what others needed me to look like. My father always said power doesn't change you, it reveals you. He said it at dinners with important guests, a glass in hand, like it was a line from a book he'd memorized to sound human. I listened from the corner of the table, young, trying to guess when he would look at me like a son and when he would look at me like a piece. My mother, meanwhile, spoke little. She had that kind of silence that isn't shyness, but surveillance, as if she knew every word could become evidence. She taught me to read a room, to catch the moment a conversation turns dangerous even when everyone is smiling. When I turned 18, my father didn't give me a watch or a car. He gave me a lesson. He took me to a windowless office in a building that didn't show up on public maps. There were stacked folders, screens glowing without sound, and men who didn't lift their eyes when he walked in. If you're going to carry my name, he told me, you have to understand the price. I thought the price was media pressure, enemies, criticism. The price was something else. It was fear. It was sleeping, knowing that anyone who shakes your hand might be measuring your neck. Even so, for years, I believed that if I played my cards right, if I obeyed, if I made myself useful, my father would see me as something more than a risk. It was my most expensive mistake, because the day the country started to crack, when rumours of leaks became briefings, when the word intervention started being said in a low voice, my father didn't look outward. He looked inward. And when a leader looks inward, the closest people become the first suspects. The counsel slid the folder toward me. I need you to remember the last 72 hours, he said. Every call, every meeting, everything that seemed small. I clenched my jaw. They arrested me. How long ago? An hour? Less, he replied. And that matters too. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper, as if touch could give me control. 3 days ago, I began, my father asked me to come to the capital. Not his office, the capital. That was already strange. There were military personnel at the doors, more than usual. No one smiled. The counsel didn't write, but his gaze sharpened. Who was there? The usuals, I said. His chief of staff, the Public Safety Commissioner, 2 National Guard generals who shouldn't have been there without a crisis, and a woman I didn't know. Describe her. I closed my eyes for a moment. Hair pulled back, flawless, not like a soldier, like someone who never has to run. She had a tiny pin on her lapel, no official insignia. And she looked at me like I'd already failed. The counsel nodded slowly. She's new, I murmured. And no one told me her name. That's a name, he replied. New. A chill ran through me. After that meeting, I continued, my father asked me for something he'd never asked me for. What? To hand over my phone. The counsel held my gaze. Did you hand it over? I swallowed. Yes. Did he give you a reason? He said there were threats. that it was for security. The counsel let out the smallest exhale. Not surprise, confirmation. Your father doesn't fear threats, he said. He fears leaks. I clenched my fists. So, he already thought that He thought someone close to him had opened a crack, he cut in, and someone offered him a fast way to seal it. By arresting me? By arresting you, he repeated, without softening it, and watching who moves. The idea was so cold it was hard to accept. And you? I asked. Where were you when all this was decided? The counsel held my gaze a beat too long. I was where I always am, he said. Between your father and the cliff. Then why didn't you stop him? Because there are moments, he replied, when stopping something makes it more dangerous. Sometimes the only way to find the hand that's pushing is to let the body fall far enough to see who smiles. I had no words, because deep down part of me understood that logic. I'd heard it in speeches, in strategy, in how my father handled political enemies, but understanding it in the abstract and living it with handcuffs on my wrists were two different worlds. The counsel tapped the slip of paper where it said, "Orders received." "This is my signal to you," he said. "Your father authorized me to get you out of here, but not out of the story." "What does that mean?" "It means you're not walking out to your house like nothing happened," he said. "You're walking out toward a place where you'll learn who tried to use you as a knife, and who tried to use your father as a blind man." My throat went dry. "And if my father is wrong?" I asked. "And if he truly believes I'm a traitor?" The counsel looked at me with a strange patience, like that question was inevitable. "Your father believes in control," he said. "And when control slips away, he needs an immediate culprit. That makes him dangerous, but it doesn't make him stupid." He leaned toward me. "What he did to you tonight," he went on, "is horrible, but it's also a confession." "A confession of what?" "Fear," he said, "that someone is closing in on him, that he no longer trusts even his shadow. And when a man like him feels fear, he does things he can't undo." My hands shook, not from the cold, from the image of my father signing that document, knowing my name would be spoken with hatred, knowing I would lose friends, a reputation, a future, just to catch someone. "What did this cost me?" I asked, more to myself than to him. "A lot," he answered, "and you still haven't paid the full total." He stood, made a minimal gesture toward the door. The guard, who had been motionless, straightened like he'd just received an inaudible order. "Listen carefully," the counsel said, and his voice lost all warmth. "In a few hours, in the corridors of that same capital, there will be people celebrating your fall. Others pretending surprise. Some who will try to come close to you like their saviors." He pointed at me, firm. "Don't take any hand you don't know. Don't believe any apology that arrives too fast. And above all—" He paused. The room felt smaller. "Above all, don't think this ends when they take the cuffs off." The door opened. The hallway smelled the same. The buzz of the light was still there. But now, for the first time since they arrested me, I felt something I didn't expect to feel. Not relief, not trust, direction. Oh, as we walked, the counsel spoke without looking at me, as if each word were calibrated to leave no traces. "Your father locked you up to see who moves," he said. "And someone already moved." "Who?" I asked, my heart pounding in my throat. The counsel turned his head slightly. "Your father's security advisor requested your immediate transfer to a facility outside the city." I stopped short. The chain of the cuffs jingled. "That wasn't in the document," I said. "No," he replied. "That's improvisation." "So what does it mean?" "That someone is in a hurry," the counsel said. "And hurry is the most honest footprint there is." We kept walking. At the corner, I saw two men waiting, different uniforms, eyes too still. One held a folder with my name. The other had a small radio in his hand, turned off like he didn't want the building to hear. The counsel stopped in front of them with the calm of someone who has already won. "Plan change," he said, and his voice left no room for discussion. The man with the folder opened his mouth, but didn't get to speak. Because the counsel produced a credential, he didn't flash it, he let it be seen. That was enough. The air changed. The men swallowed. One stepped back. The other lowered the radio like it suddenly weighed too much. And I, for the first time, understood that my father wasn't the only one with power in that world. "Orders received," the counsel repeated without looking at me. And in that instant, with the corridor still smelling of metal and lies, I understood what he promised without saying it. That treason wasn't what they'd accused me of. Treason was what was happening around my father, while he was looking at me. And if I wanted to survive, it wouldn't be enough to be innocent. I would have to learn to be dangerous, because the next door that opened might not be an exit. It might be the place where someone finally dared to finish the job